Hey everyone, this is Alex from EQT, here to go over the installation as well as the components that go into our new modular inline fueling system. The fuel line kits are split into 4 different sections. Here we have section 1, section 2 includes all of this, section 3, and section 4. Section 1 here is the main length of the fuel line. It includes the 90-degree quick disconnect that goes from the pump onto the fuel line, which the fuel line section will connect right there. This line will then run through the bottom of the car and come out in the engine bay. It'll come out in the engine bay with this custom bend we have going on right here. After that, you will then go to section 2. Moving on to section 2, we have a lot of components here. The most standard one would be the accessory bypass line. That is just this line right here. This is for if you do not want to use any of these other components and you simply just want a fuel line that includes no accessories. So for this line, there are 2 ends. You have an AN fitting and an ORB fitting. The AN fitting is the side that will connect to the section 1 right here. So it will simply just screw in like that. And the ORB fitting will move on to the section 3, which we will get to in a bit. Next, we have the fuel filter line. This is the line right here. It does look very similar to the accessory bypass line, so don't get that confused. The fuel filter line is to be used in conjunction with the fuel filter we have here. In order to install this, you have your AN fitting here, and then you have an AN fitting here and an ORB fitting here. For this one, this AN fitting will go into the section 1. And then the AN fitting here will go into the filter, leaving the ORB fitting to go onto section 3. The next option we have here is if you want to use an ethanol sensor, you will purchase the ethanol line, which is this line, as well as this fitting. For an installation, this fitting will screw into the section 1 here. You will then connect the ethanol sensor to the quick disconnect here, as well as here. Finally, it will lead to the ORB fitting on this side, which will lead to section 3. The final option is if you want to use an ethanol sensor and a fuel filter, you will purchase the ethanol sensor and fuel filter line. That is this line, as well as these 2 fittings here. You will notice that one of them has an O-ring and one of them does not. That is intentional, and we will go over that in a second. So you will also need to have an ethanol sensor as well as a fuel filter. When installing this onto your kit, the fuel filter will go into the section 1 first, screwed in like so. You will then take the quick connect fitting that does have the O-ring and install it onto the fuel filter. The ethanol sensor will then be connected to this quick disconnect, follow it up by this one, and then this female AN will get threaded into the AN that does not have the O-ring. And finally, you have the ORB end that will move on to section 3. Now moving on to section 3, this is where you will either have an MPI fuel rail or the MPI fuel rail bypass line. This is completely up to you in your build. Obviously, if you are utilizing MPI, you will just stick with your fuel rail and there is no need to purchase this line. If you are not utilizing MPI, you can purchase this line that will just take up that space where the fuel rail would normally be. And that is where both these ends are identical, and they will screw into the section 2 as well as the section 4. Finally, we have section 4. This runs from the fuel rail or the fuel rail bypass, whichever one you have, and to the high pressure fuel pump cap. So you will see here, we have one side that's a female AN and an ORB. The ORB will go to either the fuel rail or the bypass line, whichever one you purchased. And the female AN will go to the high pressure fuel pump cap. All right, now we'll go ahead and go over to the car so we can show some of these components being installed.
Well, first step to install the fuel line kit is to relieve the fuel pressure in the engine. You can either do this by pulling the fuse for the fuel pump and running the vehicle until it stalls out, or safely put a rag over a quick disconnect fitting and disconnect the fuel line catching all the fuel in the rag, but you want to be careful how you go about doing that, so that way A, you don't get fuel all over the place because it is under pressure, and 2, you don't create a fire hazard. So our system is already relieved of pressure, so we'll just go ahead and get started on everything. We're going to first remove the coolant reservoir, so that way we can get access, or better access, to the fuel line itself. So we'll disconnect that, and these 2 tabs over here get pushed in to remove the reservoir, and we're going to move this guy out of our way. And next we have to remove the rubber fuel line here. After that, we'll remove the plastic cover for the lines. This is typically a one-time use metal clamp, so you may not hit it the first time or have it come off easy. It's okay to destroy it. And this is usually when I get fed up and grab my snips. So one 10mm nut here, and then the rest just pulls off and unclip the fuel line. When you get this piece out, you need to be very careful that you don't accidentally break it. These clips right here in the bottom and the back actually hold the lines in place when it is installed. So that's going to fight you on the way coming out. Otherwise, you'll do what we did and snap it in 2 pieces. When you disconnect the fuel line fitting, it's going to be the black fitting, not the white one. The white one's going to be your evap, the black one's going to be your fuel line. Quick disconnect fitting. And when you do so, fuel will be coming out, so be prepared for that. There it is. Next, gotta get a little more access to here, so I'm gonna remove a couple clips to get this panel off. Now we gotta work on getting this guy. It's a small little plastic cap here. We're gonna work on getting this off. So when this piece is installed, this pry on the edge is right here and right here on the outside to open it, and then unclip it from the 2 lines, and that's how that piece will come out. At this point in time, it will be a good idea to wrap a fishing line or string or some kind of fishing mechanism. I'm using wire. What this will allow you to do is when you pull it out from the top side in the engine bay, it'll pull the wire through, and then you would just tie the new line to it and pull the wire back out. It'll feed everything through. And now we just go to the engine bay and pull it. Now we just need to pull our original fuel line out. And there's our fishing line. And so with your new fuel line, let's cap this off so that way we don't get any dirt in there real quick. So what I've done is I just put a piece of heat shrink on there to seal off that open end so that no dirt or debris gets in there. And we're just gonna tie the fishing line onto the end of the new line so that we pull it through once we get back underneath the car. Start that right there. And let's go pull it up from underneath the car. Now we just pull our line out. And what we found is it's actually going to be able to feed through this small tunnel rather easily. So you can actually feed it most, if not all the way from the top of the vehicle. We wanted that extra insurance to make sure that we would get it through the first time and not fight it through the whole way. That said, we're going to try to connect these 2 together and see if we can pull them out as an assembly. As we pull the old wire line out, the new one will get fed in at the same time. Now to demonstrate where the fuel lines on the Mark 7R is, we have these 2 fuel tanks here. One's actually a Golf R, one is the GTI. We use these for research and development, but the fuel line is actually going to be clipped into this slot right here. As you see, the evap, this white line is clipped into it. The black line, which is going to be a fuel line, is going to be clipped right into it, next to it. But this is actually above where you can't easily see it. So you guys are going to have to pay really special attention to that clip location, because you're going to have to unclip the old fuel line off of this, and it's very hard to see. So you're going to need long picks, long screwdrivers to get access to it. On the GTI models, it's a horizontal, not a vertical, which I think will actually prove more difficult. But knowing its location is going to help you guys to get access to it, because you know what and where to look for the fuel line clip, so that way you can unclip it and install our new fuel line onto your car. Okay, we are there. We are going top side. Now that we got our new fuel line connected to our old fuel line, we're going to attempt to pull it out and see if that works. If not, we're going to figure out a new method to do this, but it should work theoretically. There we go. Just like that. Grab our new disconnect fitting. Remove the old one. Here's a little grease to grease up the fitting to make it easier for install. Make sure the fitting on your fuel pump is nice and clean. Do the same thing there. Just a little grease. One end. Thank you. Make sure it gets all the way in. It'll go in, stop, and then pull it up and push it down the rest of the way. Make sure it's locked. There we go. And button it up here as we did with the low pressure fuel pump install. One quick thing to note is the routing of the fuel line. So we're routing it above this little clip right here to keep it up and out of the way, pending any future revisions, especially for the GTI models. This is the way in which we would recommend for the time being. So stay tuned for future revisions and updates. All right, now that you have your new fuel line installed onto the low pressure fuel pump, we're next gonna install our bracket. You're gonna wanna use the number 10 slot in the middle, but you're gonna have to break the tabs on the end so that it will fit over the new fuel line. So just put that in and snap it into place. And then just button everything up, tighten all your clips in. That's it. Now to the engine bay. Okay, next we're going to install our trim piece that we accidentally broke on the way out, but it will need to modify it. You're going to have to trim out one side. The other side is going to be your evap that's going to snap into here. When you install this, you're going to slide your new fuel line in first, get it into its slot, and then repeat with the evap, get it in the evap slot, and then slide it all the way down. So let's see how efficiently we can do this. There we go, snapped into place. Okay, snap your evap in. Then your new fuel line is going to sit right on top like that. Clip in your other clip down here. And then if you avoided our mistake and still have your other part of the trim piece, it's going to go right here and bolt up. Next, we'll reinstall our evap line. Now we're going to install our new fuel hose for this section. Hey, now that we got our new fuel line fished up all the way through here, we're going to assemble our fuel filter assembly. You're going to need to put the AN fitting on this end, the quick disconnect on this end. Quick disconnect is going to be into your ethanol sensor, and then the other half of that is going to be this quick disconnect fitting. You're going to need to connect it to this short fitting right here that goes into your fuel rail. Tighten these fittings up, check them after everything's installed and pressurized to make sure you don't have any leaks. Also, I want to note, guys, that these fittings have O-rings in them. So make sure your O-rings are on the fittings before you install them. That way you will prevent leaks. But we're gonna get started connecting these two first. Getting that lined up to close to where we want. And tightening this fitting. So when installing the new fuel line to the MPI rail, you actually have to make sure it's disconnected from the intake manifold and up a little bit. This is the way you can have enough room to fit your wrench on there or to tighten it up. Again, these AN fittings right here have O-rings on them, so please pay attention, make sure they are on there when you install your fuel line kit. And then just connect your ethanol sensor and we'll be good to go. On the other side of the MPI rail for the new fuel line kits, you're going to install it just like you did on the other side, making sure that there is an O-ring on this fitting, and route it down this way, so that way it is under your coolant pipe but over your electrical harness. And next, for the high pressure fuel cap, we're going to be removing that next, so that way we can install our line onto it. This cap is very tight, so you're going to need a really big wrench with some leverage, or a hammer and a wrench. There will be a lot of fuel coming out of this thing, so just be ready for that. Now, we have to get the diaphragm out, so that way we can put it into the new cap. So let's go do that. The best way that I found without damaging it is to actually wait until it's completely dry, all the fuel has evaporated out, and then to actually cut the old cap and then pry it off in a section or two until you can get the diaphragm out. Okay, so as you can see right here, I've cut 2 notches into the side of the old high pressure fuel cap housing, and now we'll be just smacking it with a hammer to break off this chunk and carefully remove the diaphragm inside so as to not damage it, and install it into our new high pressure fuel cap. So now that we got our diaphragm out and the retaining ring for it undamaged, we are going to install it into our new high pressure cap. So diaphragm will go in first, and then your retaining ring will go in next, and then you're just going to gently tap that in with the hammer and a drift or a socket or some kind of, for lack of a better term, a tamping device that will allow it to apply even pressure all the way down. So now that we got our diaphragm installed into our new cap, we're going to go ahead and install the cap back onto the high pressure fuel pump and tighten it down. Now we're going to install our fuel line. And there we go. Now we just got to pressurize the system, check it for leaks, and start it up and make sure everything's good.